my people, and my family, and the ones who say they understand me. Yeah, I see you, and I see you. We gon' make it to the top, that's what we do. Tell them like, black is the new green. Black is the new green. We gon' make it to the top, we gon' live our dream. Shout out to the ones who doubt me. I'm a strong black king, tell them crown me. Beat the odds, leave them mad, now they frowning. I be swimming in the money like I'm drowning. Black is the new green. Black is the new green.
Hey guys, welcome to Black is the New Green. Every time I hear that jingle, I'm always like dancing. So sorry if I'm like still in my moment when we go live. So this is an original series of live interviews dedicated to shining the spotlight on Black entrepreneurs and the amazing achievements of our community. I'm Michelle Taylor Willis, your host, and I'm super excited about all of you guys joining us live today. Black is the New Green was created by Radivision, the new streaming and community platform for the startup world, where everyone can be entertained, learn about, and participate in the entrepreneurial revolution that is transforming how we live, work, play, and create our own futures. My guest today is doing just that. I cannot wait for you guys to listen and be empowered and just inspired by everything that he has done. His name is Dr. Zwade Marshall, and he is the founder of Doc to Doc Lending, which is a lending platform based strictly for lending to dentists and doctors only. So like if you're not a doctor or dentist, you can't even play in this space. It's so niched, and I love that. But it's a fintech company. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that Dr. Marshall is a real doctor. He doesn't just play one on TV. Those are real scrubs. He's actually probably in between seeing patients right now. So I want to make sure that we're very judicious with this time. And Dr. Marshall, we're so thankful to have you here, taking time out of your interventional pain practice to talk to us today. So welcome to Black is the New Green.
Michelle, I'm thrilled to be here with you. I love the jingle and the intro as well. You got me dancing.
Yeah.
And I love the platform. Thank you for the introduction. And I think we're going to have fun today. And hopefully we can inspire some folks and get them to understand that accomplishing your dream is within reach if you put in the work.
I love that. Accomplishing your dream is within reach if you put in the work. I'm going to write that down. Now, I'm not going to credit you with it. I'm going to pretend like I said it on my own. Is that okay?
Fine.
Okay, cool. All right. So first of all, I want to congratulate you on all of the amazing achievements that you've had. And as we move through this conversation, I hate that we only have about 35 minutes because you've done so many amazing things. But we're here to talk about Doc to Doc, and I know your physician journey, so to speak, will kind of come out as we talk about Doc to Doc. But let everybody know exactly what Doc to Doc is, why you exist, and what you do.
Sure. Well, once again, thank you. I am Zwade Marshall, co-founder of Doc to Doc Lending. I have a second half that's a part of the founding journey, and we issue consumer loans or personal loans to physicians and dentists throughout all 50 states. The inspiration for the company's foundation was based on a lived and shared experience of both my co-founder and me. In my case, I was a graduating medical student from Emory in Atlanta, and I was moving to Boston to go to Harvard for my residency fellowship. It was one of the most impactful days of my medical journey. It's the day that you get this draft slip, so to speak, not unlike what NFL or NBA players get when it announces that they're going to be going to the Lakers or the Knicks. I got drafted by the Lakers or the Knicks of medicine. I was going to Harvard, and I needed to figure out how to get from point A to point B, from Atlanta, a low cost of living city, to Boston, one of the most expensive rental markets in the country. At that time, I had north of $200,000 in student loan debt. I had a FICO score that was sub 700, and my income as a resident was $54,000 a year. So I needed to borrow 17 grand. And as I applied to banks for that loan, they all viewed me as a high risk borrower and denied the loan, or they gave it to me at a credit card interest rate offer. And the whole process felt unfair because I'd not been irresponsible with credit. I'd not had any black eyes on my credit report. I was just burdened by the cost of medical education in the United States. And that journey took a toll on my financial profile that made me ineligible to access capital that was priced according to my true risk. What Doc to Doc does is we've reshifted the paradigm of what risk means for physicians. And if you think about the fact that I just matched into a pretty lucrative specialty in one of the best universities in the country, and we knew exactly what I was going to make on average if you fast forward 4 years from that day that I matched into Harvard. And so we look at our borrowers prospectively. What is your specialty of match? Where did you train? And we go by specialty and training specific to that hospital. So for instance, everyone knows of Harvard and Hopkins, but people don't know of Texas Tech being exceptional for spine care, for instance. So we know if you train at Texas Tech, that's one of the highly ranked programs for that specialty. We look at your zip code of practice. We look at the number of years you've been in practice, all as proxies to make your interest rate and payment terms more friendly for your credit journey.
Okay, stop. I was just listening. I thought there was more.
There's more, but I want to give you a chance to help guide you more.
No, listen, this is your platform, right? So as much and as long as you want to talk, you absolutely have the platform to do it. So there's a couple things that you mentioned here, and I know we have a short video I want to show here in just a second, but you've said a couple things that really put this in perspective for me and hopefully people who are watching. You reshift the paradigm of what, debt and the debt burden looks like specifically for physicians, because you're right? You're going to school to basically save lives. And you know that down the road, you're going to be able to make a lot of money. So why is it that you've been accepted to Harvard, you have incredible grades, your journey looks incredible, and people are just looking at numbers on a paper and going, oh, there's no way he can do this. We're not giving him any money. It is unfair. It does seem unfair. But the beautiful piece that I love about that is that you and your co-founder didn't just say, yeah, it's unfair and that sucks, and you got to live with it. You actually now went a step further to say, we can actually do something about this. It won't help us, but it's going to help everybody that comes after us, which is brilliant. And that's really what it's about, right? Being the change and not being burdened by what the change isn't, so to speak, right?
Absolutely. And I love the way you framed that. I think that society still views physicians as being the servants or the helpers. And there's also a notion or a preconception that all doctors make a lot of money. The way healthcare has changed over time, the educational journey and the cost of the education has continued to increase over the years. But there's been a downward depression on compensation and salaries because of the way the kind of healthcare landscape has shifted, where insurance companies are more empowered. There's been a consolidation of hospital systems, and so more doctors are being employed as opposed to owning their own practices. And the few that do own their own practices are challenged by the pre-cert requirements for insurance companies, the increasing cost of access to care for patients, where deductibles are so much higher and premiums have gone up. It's caused this really complicated and challenging landscape to practice medicine as an independent physician. A large part of what we
I'm sorry.
So a large part of what we view our value as bringing is we're helping to empower doctors to be able to become their own health enterprise and kind of regain control of accessing capital and being able to provide the services to their patients in a way that's cost effective and more capital efficient.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because as physicians, and obviously this is what you do, your day job, right, is being a doctor. You're right. So many things have changed across the landscape, especially like insurance, right? I mean, 10 years ago, you come in, you see a patient, They pay a copay, the insurance company pays you, and you go on about your way. And it's just not that cut and dry anymore. It just takes so much more as a physician to earn that same dollar. And for the people who are truly saving lives, so to speak, it shouldn't be that cut and dry for you guys. It really shouldn't. I want to show a short video where you talk about how you look at your loan applicants a little bit differently than a traditional banking or lending institution would. Guys, can we roll that video?
What Doc to Doc does is that we look at our physicians and dentists prospectively in terms of where are they going to be. So we really care about your specialty, how many years you've had in training, how many years until you graduate, what's your zip code of practice, your free cash flow, and there's no hard credit inquiry. It's only a soft pull. Many of our borrowers will take our loans to consolidate high interest debt, and that helps to improve their overall credit profile to access larger loans for mortgages, for practice loans and commercial real estate, etc. So we found ourselves to be in this pretty good spot because of a shared lived experience that our founding team has had and share with our physician peers.
You know what? So talk just a little bit about the need for physicians to need money, right? You mentioned, coming out of school and needing money just to move to university, right? To further your education. But I think when we think about physicians, we don't think about you guys needing money.
That's right. That's right.
So what are some of the instances where physicians would actually need money outside of a student loan, in addition to what you mentioned, even in from a personal perspective?
Sure. So a lot of times we think of ourselves as being servants to the servants, right? And there really is a human element to what we do because physicians have been trained to kind of suck it up, put your head down, and go along and do the work. And many of us are struggling silently because of shame of not being perfect and not having a perfect credit profile. And there's a level of embarrassment with which our physicians seek loans. It's done late at night. It's done in the quiet of their apartments. They're not talking to each other about hardship or access to capital. And so we found ourselves becoming this sounding board to help to nurture and coach and to encourage our peers to understand that we've all been there together. So specifics. The very first borrower that we gave a loan to is a story that I remember vividly because it was very impactful for me as a co-founder. She was a first-generation American, a first-generation physician, because many doctors come from a lineage of doctors, right? And so you'll find that the doctors that look like you and me are first-timers, and we represent our families and a generation of people that look at us as their way out of whatever social circumstance that we're in. And we don't have the coaching, we don't have that financial acumen that's passed on from our family members. And so we're paving that way on our own. She was moving from New York, from Cornell to Southern California for an internal medicine residency. And her mom loaned her the money out of her 401k and needed to replace it back into the 401k so that she didn't get the tax penalty. As this young woman spoke with me on the phone, you can hear the tremor in her voice because it's stressful. She's leaving her community and her support system in New York to go all across the country. She's got this financial hardship and she has her board exams to take in 4 weeks. There's a toll that kind of stress takes on us as physicians. And there's the added layer of the imposter syndrome of when I left Emory to go to Harvard, feeling like I didn't belong in Harvard because everyone else is so much smarter than I am. And you're dealing with that self-doubt in addition to learning the material, to caring for patients, and secretly going back home, worrying about how to make ends meet to put food on the table. In her case, we funded that loan, sent her a card saying welcome to the family and a pack of board prep materials, say good luck on the
Oh,
boards. So she called us back, and now she's really crying because we understood her hardship. But the
mm,
stories don't stop there. We have female physicians that are in these long surgical residencies. If you're a neurosurgeon, it'll take you 9 to 12 years from the time you finish medical school to being in practice.
wow.
And what they'll often have to do is preserve their fertility. So it's oocyte cryopreservation. That's freezing your eggs. That's a $35,000 expense. Folks are borrowing for that. There are folks
Wow.
borrowing for fertility treatments. There are people that borrow from us because they need to get a down payment on a practice loan. And so they'll use our funds as their equity injection to get a larger business loan. And
Wow.
so the use cases are innumerable. And we don't have any restrictions on what you use the cash for. It's a personal loan. We ask just so we can have our own data harvesting, but it's really meant to be a loan that the physician uses in their own good judgment to do what they need to do with it. Credit card consolidation is probably the biggest use case currently because folks will rack up high interest credit card debt because it's easy to get access to a credit card,
Mm,
and they'll use our loan to consolidate the $45,000 or $80,000 that they've accrued over time.
wow. I love this human element you put to it. And it's almost like um, you have this sagacity to know you can line up all the pieces to this puzzle, right? And know who should get money and who shouldn't. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Where and we've all applied for loans and at some point been denied for some reason or another, right? But to really make people feel like they're not just like numbers on paper, and to dig into their profile, so to speak. And the fact that you don't just expose the human element, but you show the human element to send her board prep materials and a card. And I would assume, I know that you probably can't do that with all of your borrowers now, but I would assume that there's still this level of customer service that is built into how you do business that you don't normally see from lending institutions, and certainly not just your average startup or fintech company, right? So to me, it's like you're kind of turning not just lending in your industry, but the whole lending industry kind of upside down for how you absolutely do business.
Thank you. That is exactly what we aim to do. Um, we continue to preserve that human element and that the high touch concierge nature of which we become known. Every borrower that comes to our platform speaks with a physician member of our team to say
Mm,
welcome to the community. A physician tells another physician exactly what their loan rate will be, what the terms are. We explain common financial concepts that doctors just don't know. What is APR compared to interest rate? Why is the APR higher than interest rate? What's a variable loan mean compared to a fixed rate loan? We explain these simple things, not as financial advisors, just as peers, so they can understand the impact of the loan that they're getting and how best to utilize that money to make them their lives better. Um, and so the question that we get often now, because we've now been doing this for some time and we've had some modicum of success, is how do you scale that? How do you scale having doctors do these one-on-one touches with
right,
with the borrowers? We
right,
have the most expensive call center possible, right? You're paying MDs to make these calls. Well,
right.
we're extraordinarily mission driven. And you'll find that we've got a cohort of investors that are physicians that are putting their coin behind this concept, and they just want to see it succeed because it's more than money, it's more than success. Someone really smart told me it's about being significant and not just successful. And so look at that,
Who
Michelle.
is this person? Tell me more about her. Is she beautiful?
I know how to quote you. Absolutely. Yeah. So we're aiming for significance and not just success. And our entire team really believes in the mission, and so they're willing to put in the time to kind of shepherd these borrowers through the pipeline and create that affinity. Because ultimately, the value of this company is not based upon the interest rate spread. right?
Mm.
If I'm lending at 5.5% and I'm borrowing or getting the money from investors at 3.5%, that's
Right.
not where the value is. The value really is in the lifetime value of our customer, in the other products they will continually consume over the course of their careers. And we know that doctors, more than any other field, will have a personal loan, a large student loan. They buy big homes, big cars. They need disability insurance, med mal insurance, term life insurance, annuities, and the vertical financial instruments go on and on and on. So in order for me to realize the value that that physician member brings to our community, I have to ensure that the experience is so rich that they come back and they trust me when they need that second, third, or fourth product. And so it's in our interest to preserve that affinity and that doctor to doctor relationship.
Absolutely. So you mentioned investors. Let's talk about that for a second. You're a black man. I don't know if you did you realize that or not, but I can see that
I've
you're
been
a
this way
black
my whole life.
man. And so we know that there's disparity. I mean, we talk about this every week on the show, right? And get different perspectives on the disparities that exist when we talk about black founders asking for money, going to investors, finding investors. Did you experience difficulty getting people to believe in this vision and raising money? And if so, how did you overcome that? Because I know that your leadership team is very diverse. Your borrowers are diverse. So what did that look like for you?
It was atypical, I think. And I'll tell you that when we began the journey of looking for money, we started with our peers. And I was at Harvard amongst Harvard anesthesiologists who happened to be well coined, and they already knew and trusted me as a clinician. I was an MD, MBA in the Harvard residency class. I was a chief resident. So I had some social cachet that I could lean upon. And the initial raise was not very difficult for me. But as time went on and we began to grow and you began to enter those more sophisticated circles of check writers
Mm,
who try to poke holes in the idea, and they did, because we learned a lot from pitching. Like great pitch sessions, you leave with more than money. You leave with a number of sage tips on how to refine your business model to have a greater impact on your borrower, but also on your investor base. So as I entered those rooms, there became a level. I remember there was one meeting I had where my co-founder and I met with an investor in Atlanta at La Colonial Restaurant, if you guys know Atlanta. And he'd been speaking with me over the phone for the previous month and a half. And my co-founder, who's white, flew in to Atlanta for the meeting as well. And we met for dinner. So as we began the introductions, the potential investor was certain that my co-founder, Kenton, was the person that he'd been interacting with and was the leader of the organization, and that there was some differential in terms of hierarchy
um,
where he was a guy and I was kind of a sidekick that was handling the scheduling of the meeting, so to speak. Um,
right.
and it was amusing. Like, so for me, I think I find those interactions a little amusing, but I can certainly understand the impact it has on a larger scale to really disenfranchise folks. Now, I benefited from the Black Lives Matter movement over the course of the past 2 years with check writers, and I'll tell you what. I'll
Mm,
tell you why. So COVID did a couple of things. So COVID with the BLM movement, it was a double gift for my unique circumstance. Lenders like me, or like Doc, saw their default rates during the pandemic go sky high because people couldn't repay their loans.
right.
They had real hardship in their households. During that same period of time, Doc had no defaults. And so we had a physician portfolio that continued to make good on their debt obligation to us while the rest of borrowers were really struggling. So that helped to validate exactly what we've been doing with our underwriting mechanism, because we had borrowers who were deeply subprime that most other lenders would not lend to
Right.
because they thought they would default and they had
Right.
not defaulted at all.
But there's kudos to you guys for again having that sagacity to know who can execute on this and who can't. I mean, that's your team just being fantastic at choosing the right people.
Well, so it was a hypothesis that we were testing, and we iterated the model, and you're right, we hit gold, right? It made sense in our minds, but the more data points we had, it validated the underlying assumption that physicians should be a pretty good bet in terms of debt,
Hmm.
irrespective of what their FICO score says. So FICO should
Wow.
be divorced from risk underwriting for this segment of the population. And we've
Wow.
got the model to underwrite their loans more effectively and more fairly. But what I also noticed was that early conversations that we were having with sophisticated VCs pre-pandemic, those stopped, reasonably so, because there was, an unease around where the markets were going and folks wanted to
Sure.
hold on to their capital.
Sure.
Then the BLM movement happened. The George Floyd, the tragic George Floyd incident happened, and there was more protests and more attention being brought to disparities in all sectors of life, especially for me in the financing VC private equity world. And we came out of the fall of 2021 with a lot more interest from large check writers because they remembered hearing or seeing the dog and pony show of Dr. Doc Lending and seeing this black face talking about it. And they figured, let's check in with the guy that is co-founder of Dr. Doc and see how we can be helpful. So there was certainly a shift in the attention that co-founders and founders that are minorities, Latinx, LGBTQ are getting because of an increased awareness to the gap in financing for early stage companies that are led by minority teams. And thankfully, I'm in Atlanta, where there's a larger concentration of capital aimed at minorities situated here. Now, our current funding source, we get investments from physicians all across the country. And we have a VC partner in Sino Lender Finance. They're based in Atlanta. And we closed our last round oversubscribed. So we had just under $1 million of excess capital that we turned away at our last round. And so we've been riding a wave of success, and I feel grateful for it.
That's amazing. I mean, I know your story, and then just listening to it and just hearing the success that you had, and I love, you have these little tidbits and these nuggets that you put out there, right? But at the end of the day, it goes back to what you were saying. Like, if your dreams can be realized with hard work, right? Surrounding yourself with the right people. You mentioned earlier your network. You were able to get your first round of funding, so to speak, because you went to your personal network, people that already knew, much like what you do with your borrowers, they knew that you were worth more or more valuable or more than what was on paper. They knew your history, they knew your schooling, they knew what you bring to the table, all of these things, right? And they're like, hey, yeah, absolutely, I'll give you some money, Zwade. And you have, in turn, I don't know if you've thought about it like this, but you've in turn now done the same thing with your borrowers that people did with you originally.
Indeed. And thanks for that, Michelle. You're right. It's a pay it forward mentality, and medicine is full of that because we're mentored through each stage of our career. Why not through financial hardship as well? I'll tell you
Yeah.
that most of your listening audience that are building a company may agree with me in this one. The hardest thing to do is ask your friends and family for money for a business. It raises the stakes of failure, right? Because you'll agonize about starting the company because of fear of failure initially and likelihood of success.
Yeah.
And then when you ask your loved ones to open their wallets and write a check and give money that they're comfortable with and can afford, many of them will give more than they should because they want to remind you that they believe in you. And the responsibility of having to be a steward of people you know's money is
Yeah.
it can become crippling, right?
Yes.
But it makes it so that you wake up earlier, you go to bed later because you're reminded of what's at stake, and it makes you sharper. It can be really motivating for the right personality type. And thankfully, Kenton and I are motivated by the trust that our peers have placed in us. And
Right.
it's now become more than, being successful, but we have careers and medical reputations at stake to ensure that we do things ethically. So we've got the additional burden of not just being good business people, but doing good and staying true to the mission. Things that are a competition, they don't have to disclose every single element of their loan per law. But we go the extra mile to ensure that we do, because the last thing we want to have is someone not understand the product and take it for the wrong reason. And so we go above and beyond with integrity, because that's who our peers expect us to be, and that's who we are.
That's amazing. I could clearly, I feel like we should make the show an hour long because there's always so many nuggets and so much to dive into, especially with somebody like you. So I'm going to move into what I've unofficially dubbed this as our lightning round. And I'm going to ask some questions that have come in from our viewing audience. And I'm going to ask you to answer those questions in like 30 to 45 seconds as we kind of move through the end of our broadcast here. All right.
Sure.
So actually, this comes from our founder, Mona Defrawi. Says, how long has Dr. Doc been operating and writing loans? And how many loans are you approving at this point?
Great. First loan was issued in May 2019. That's that borrower that I mentioned who moved from New York to California. And so it's just under 3 years now. We're financing just about 3 million in loans per month. We've had 6x growth over the course of the past year-over-year growth for the company.
Wow. From scratch. You didn't buy this company. Nobody gifted it to you. It wasn't generational wealth passed down.
No.
From scratch. Amazing.
From zero to something, right?
You've got to be onto something, friend. Onto something. If not, just keep putting needles in people's backs. All right, this is from a Radivision viewer. What a brilliant solution. Peer-to-peer lending by a knowledgeable group. Impressive. So kudos.
Thank you.
This is from another Radivision viewer. What inspired you to found this company? I know you touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but this may be somebody that came on in the end.
My personal experience with financial hardship. I knew well what the humiliation and shame and embarrassment felt like to have a suboptimal credit profile and worry about it, and not know that many of my peers had the same feeling. I also came from an immigrant household. I moved to this country when I was 17 years old. And this is the best place in the world to be. It's a country that allows you to have an idea and to nurture it and to flourish. And you can see the success within your generation. And it's harder to accomplish elsewhere.
Wow. All right. Final question from a viewer. Can you expand Doc to Doc to include more lenders? I knew that was coming. I'm sure business people, et cetera, also would love to fund doctors who would have a much lower risk profile than other borrowers.
That is in the works. So on the investment side, certainly we're building out an opportunity for folks to come in if they're non-physicians. And then on the member side, we're iteratively exploring refining our model to include others besides physicians and dentists. And so more to come soon.
And when you say others outside of physicians and dentists, do you mean other people with medical backgrounds, like maybe a doctor of physical therapy, or do you actually mean outside of the medical industry?
So it's going to be incremental. We know physicians well. So we're going to start with the next round being nurse practitioners, anesthetists, and healthcare professionals. And depending upon how smart we continue to grow into being and underwriting loans, we'll expand farther. But for now, we're focusing on the healthcare segment.
Got it. Okay, great. Well, always wonderful to talk to you. And you are an inspiration on even without Dr. Doc, you're an inspiration on your own, right? Just like you said, an immigrant, Emory trained, you got your MD and your MBA, which explains, or partly explains, I imagine, why you are literally brilliant in business, double board certified. I mean, Harvard, I mean, who goes to Harvard? Like, seriously, really? And finds people that will give them money, you know? I mean, just what you've done has been amazing. And you are certainly worth the roses and your flowers right now. So congratulations to you and your team. Do you want to tell people how they can actually come and apply for loans, find out more about your company, and how they can actually give when you're ready for the next round of funding?
Thank you so much for the warm interview and for the time together and for your closing comments. We're at doc2doclending.com, and we currently fund loans for physicians and dentists anywhere in the United States. We'd be happy to have a conversation about your lending need or your borrowing need, and we've got a team of concierges ready to take your calls or your emails as well. But doc2doclending.com. Thank you, Michelle.
And I'll make the note that that's the number 2, doclending.com. Right?
That's correct. Yes.
Right. Do I get like, I don't know, maybe half a percentage point worth of equity or just, I mean, like, because, you know, that number 2 is important, right? I mean,
everything's negotiable. Sure.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, thank you for joining us today. I know if you could talk back to me, you would be like, oh my gosh, Michelle, this guy is amazing. And he absolutely is. Thank you so much for tuning in. And listen, if you have friends who couldn't be here with us today, make sure you send them to radavision.com to watch video on demand. There's no excuse. You can be running or working out or doing whatever and listening and being inspired all while you multitask, right? Black is the new green. This is our community where we are inspiring you to thrive, build, and support amazing companies. But most importantly, we get to share our stories right here. We can feed off the energy of amazing heroes like Dr. Marshall here, who succeed against all kinds of odds, right? These are people who put it all out there. They risk it all just to get a shot at following their passions and creating value in the world. And guess what, guys? You can too. You've got several examples of it every week right here. Again, I'm Michelle Taylor Willis. You can find me on just about everything at Michelle Taylor Willis. But most importantly, you can find me right here every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 a.m. Pacific on Black is the New Green. So we'll see you next time.
Yeah, I do it for my people and my family and the ones who say they understand me. Yeah, I see you and I see you. We gon' make it to the top, that's what we do. Tell them like, black is the new green. Black is the new green. We gon' make it to the top, we gon' live our dream. Shout out to the ones